Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today we're doing Should You Play It, a segment brought to you by Board Game Co. and Board Online, Board Offline. In Should You Play It, we pick a game, we go over briefly how to play it, nothing too in-depth, and then we cover 5 reasons why it might be a good game for you and your group, and 5 reasons why it might not be a good game for you and your group. In today's video, we are doing Spirit Island. Spirit Island is brought to you by Greater Than Games, the same people who did Sentinels of the Multiverse. Now, in Spirit Island, it's a cooperative game. In Spirit Island, you are basically playing a spirit repelling the evil invaders trying to come to your island and settle there. Basically the reverse to dozens of games from Catan to, well, dozens of other games. In any case, in Spirit Island, you pick a spirit, you have the spirit's powers, and then throughout the game, you're slowly going to grow the powers available to you from a common stack of power cards. Each round, the invaders, meanwhile, are slowly coming to the island, then settling, and then fighting. There's specifically 3 phases to the game. They settle, they build, and then they fight. Now, you have to prepare around those phases, because you know where they're going to settle and where they're going to fight, and so you know where you're going to build and where they're going to fight. And then you have to kind of prepare how you and your fellow spirits are going to deal with those invaders, because if you let them get a tad bit out of hand, you will lose, and you will lose quickly. You need to keep them in check through the use of specific powers and the way they use them and the powers that you have, and using the extra symbols you'll generate to further buff up your own inherent spirit powers. It's really a very tightly controlled game where you're just slowly escalating how powerful your spirits are, while at the same time the board game state is slowly escalating how fast the invaders are coming and what they're doing to, well, invade and settle. By the end of the game, hopefully you will either have won or you will have become overwhelmed with the invaders and will lose. That is basically the very short version of how to play it. There's a lot more going on here, but that's the short overview of how to play Spirit Island. So, let's go into the reasons why it might be a good game for you and your group. Reason number 1 is it has great solo play. This is the game that got me into solo gaming. I mean that with no joke. It's not like this and another game. This was the game that made me aware that solo gaming can actually be a fully rewarding experience and not just a series of little app-like games. I don't think I ever played a solo game like this before. I'd only played lighter solo games like Friday and whatnot, and I do like Friday, don't get me wrong, but I didn't really play a fully immersive strategic solo game until I gave this a shot. It's a cooperative game, and therefore many cooperative games can be played solo. You could control multiple spirits, or you can just control one. I personally have only controlled one, and we'll get to that in a second. But I controlled one spirit, played it a few times, really enjoyed it, and even now it's still a game that I'm happy to pull out to play solo. I'm happy to pull out to play cooperatively. It is a really tremendously rewarding solo experience. Reason number 2 is it solves the alpha leader problem. Now, solves might be a bit of a strong word. It doesn't necessarily solve it, but it certainly prevents it from being as impactful as it can be in many games. The alpha leader problem, to those who don't know, is the idea that a single player dominates the strategy of the game, saying, well, what if you do that, and you should do that, and they can do it politely, and it isn't as much of a problem, or they can be a little bit more forceful of, you should really do that. And it can really kill a cooperative experience, because you don't really feel like you need to be there. You feel like this guy needs to be here, and I'm just enabling his little power trip fantasy of playing a board game. The alpha leader problem in Spirit Island is solved or lessened because of how complex everything is. It is ridiculously hard. With 2 players you can maybe do it, but with 3 just give up, and with 4 give up even more. It is so hard to account for all the complexities of, well, which cards do you have, and what will you do, and what will the invaders do? It gets so incredibly complicated so fast that the alpha leader can't be the alpha leader. He's busy with his own hand. He can kind of give generic advice of, well, we need to deal with these 2 spots, but he can't tell you how to deal with them, which makes you feel still involved. If the guy who's running the show says these 2 areas need to be dealt with, and you come up with how to deal with it, that's fine. You'll still feel involved, and it won't have that alpha leader problem where you just feel like a player piece at the table. So it does a great job with that. Reason number 3 is it has incredibly rewarding gameplay. This goes back to that complexity that solves the alpha leader problem, but the gameplay is just so ridiculously rewarding. You have a problem presented to you, you take a look at your power cards, you take a look at the various options you can do, and there's a gigantic tree of options in front of you. This is not like, oh, which 3 choices. There's so many combinations of how you can play this out that when you sit there and you look at the board and you look at your hand and you figure out a way to optimize around that, if you figure out a way to sit there and deal with the invaders and to stop them from building here and to stop the combat here, it just feels like you solved a puzzle every single time. Every round, every single round you play feels like a miniature puzzle of how to optimize around it, and it's just so rewarding when you get a solution that prevents the settlers from actually doing that much damage. Reason number 4, and this goes back to previous reason as well, is there's near infinite variability in this game. Between the multiple spirits you can choose, between the way you can combine spirits when you're playing with more than one player, or if you're playing with one player and more than one spirit, between the powers because each spirit has their own hand of powers, but then there's these giant power decks where you're constantly pulling powers from it, adding to your spirit, between those powers that your spirits will grow with each game, the difficulty levels. I mean, the game comes in with multiple difficulty levels. You can start with the basic, and then there's like 5 or 6 difficulty levels with multiple scenarios for those difficulty levels. This game has so much variability. I have the expansion packed inside, haven't even touched it yet. There's just no incentive for me to do so because I haven't come close to experiencing what this game has to offer. Every single game is a drastically different experience. If you like near infinite variability, this game certainly has it. Reason number 5 is powers, and I say that with a giant exclamation mark at the end. Powers can just be so much fun. If you're someone who likes powers, if you're someone who likes the fact that when you walk into a game, you're not just presented with a character that you're playing, but you're also presented with these incredible abilities and choices that make your guy feel like you're doing something, that you're not just strategically doing something, but you have these customized options that are only available to you. This game has that in spades. Between your spirit's starting powers and between the fact that every few rounds you're generally adding powers to your hand, and they just get so much fun. It is, if you're someone who likes that, if you're someone who likes I have the ability that lets me move these 3 guys and then destroy these 2 while adding this to the board, it's just a ton of fun. I like strategic games that are more, abstract games. I like games like Kalis, which are more tight and not as power. But I love games with powers. I love it. Cthulhu Death May Die, Spirit Island, Mage Knight, any game that has the ability to feel like you're doing something cool, I just really enjoy that in a game. As far as the reasons you might not be a game for you and your group, number 1 is the components are just a shame. I mean, this is a game that's begging for a deluxeified upgrade pack. It's not a cheap game to begin with, don't get me wrong, and it's well worth it. But while the artwork is fine, while the cards are fine, and I say fine, I know people complain about them, I don't have that much of a problem with the cards or the artwork. The little plastic playing pieces feel like someone took some game out of the thrift store and put together a prototype copy. If you told me Spirit Island was a prototype copy that somebody else was playing with, I'd believe you. I mean, those pieces are just, they're garbage. And this game is begging for an upgrade kit to replace the buildings, to replace the guys, to make it feel like the deluxe experience it is. And if anyone knows about any Etsy pieces or whatever, send me a link. I've looked, I haven't found anything that I liked enough. But the components are just not up to the quality of this game. Reason number 2 is it is a brain burner. Now, I went into this with the pros of how variable it is and solving the alpha leader problem and the rewarding gameplay, but the con to all those 3 is that it is a brain burner. This is a game where if you don't like the fact that you're being presented with dozens and dozens of options and the ways to construct your turn in a way that will actually help you win, if you don't like the fact that you're going to have to sit there and figure that out, this game's not for you. This is a lot of staring at your cards and a lot of, well, if I do this, then that, and if I do this, then that, but if I do this and he does this, then that. There's a lot of that in this game. It provides rewarding gameplay, but this is not a game that you want to pick up after a hard day at work when you're just looking for something light to chill by. This is a deeply rewarding experience, but it is a brain burner. Reason number 3 is it can be a bit solvable and or formulaic. Now, this is more of a problem at 1 or 2 players than it is at 3 or 4. Like I said earlier about the alpha leader, 3 and 4 just get so crazy complicated that to a certain extent you just kind of have to think through the best thing you can do and just hope it works out for the best. But with 1 or 2 players, you can get to a point where between yourself and your ally or whoever's your friend who's playing with you, you can get to a point where you can kind of optimize the heck out of how the game is going to play out, how the round is going to play out, and you can sit there and perfectly solve the game, which can take a little bit of the fun away from the game. Like, I enjoy it in Pandemic, I really do, where in Pandemic where I sit there and I plan through the best optimal way to survive the round, and then suddenly that card that had a 1 in 7 chance popping up shows up, and then suddenly the whole board gets, disease cubes everywhere. I like that in a game. I like that little bit of craziness that's left in a game like this. Spirit Island at 1 or 2 players, you can solve to a certain degree around that, and it takes a little bit of the fun out of the game. Reason number 4 is it has an anticlimactic endgame. Now, I talked about this in my video with Pandemic Legacy. This is something that I was wondering as I put this video together whether it's inherently in all cooperative games, but it's definitely not. Like, Cthulhu Death May Die is just one example. I know I bring that up a lot, but Cthulhu Death May Die is just one example where this is not a problem, where the endgame is actually awesome because of how everything just power escalates to a point. But in Spirit Island, the endgame can be a bit anticlimactic. By the time you get to the endgame, you're either obviously losing or obviously have the board in control. So the first 3/4 or 4/5 of the game is great, but that last little end bit is, you just know how it's playing out and you're just going through the motions at that point. So it can be a little bit anticlimactic. It is a problem that I have seen in a bunch of cooperative games, just the nature of the beast and the way cooperative games are built, but not in all cooperative games, and it would be great if that could be solved more. The same way the alpha leader problem has become a problem to solve, an anticlimactic endgame should be a problem to solve. And just look at other games that have solved it or don't have it and then take it from there. And finally, reason number 5 is powers. Now, I said this was a pro, and it is a pro, but it can also be a con. I mean, many of the pros can be a con to an extent, but powers can be a big con. I mean, I have multiple friends that do not like games that just have tons and tons and tons of cards. What they want from a game is they want to learn how to play the game. They want to pick a game, let's say, even if you pick, let's say, 5 tribes, like behind me over here. 5 tribes has 30 genies or something like that, and then the rest of the game from there is done. Innis is a game that has tons of options, but basically the crux of the game comes down to 17 cards that are cycling around, then 30 cards that show up here and there. If you are someone that likes to learn the meat of a game and likes the powers to be kind of secondary so that they don't distract you from constantly having to relearn and relearn and relearn, this game doesn't have that. The powers, and don't get me wrong, you don't have to relearn the game for each powers, but every game is a new way of learning how to play based on the powers at hand. I have lots of friends that prefer to have a game that they can iterate upon and get progressively better each time they play it. To a certain extent, in Spirit Island you will get better every time you play it, but those powers just force you to constantly relearn it and something new every time. If you like something simpler, and I don't mean simpler from a game strategy stance, I just mean from less new things always being added, then powers can be a con as well. So that's basically it. Just a quick summary. Reasons to like it: great solo play, solves the alpha leader problem, it has rewarding gameplay when you figure out those combos, near infinite variability, and powers. And 5 reasons not to like it: terrible components, at least with the miniatures and buildings. It can be a real brain burner. It can be a little bit solvable or formulaic at 1 or 2 player counts. It has a bit of an anticlimactic endgame, and again, powers. There you have it. There are 5 reasons to play Spirit Island, as well as 5 reasons not to play Spirit Island. If you play this game, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree? Do you want to play this based on the video, or do you kind of want to pass on it based on this video? That's basically it. This video is brought to you by Board Game Co. You can subscribe to our other YouTube channel down below, where you can find more videos like this that I do on our own channel as well. Other than that, have a great one, and until next time, well, keep gaming.